Welcome to Advanced Nurses. We connect with nurses who inspire other nurses by sharing their experiences. And so we're able to bring that information to you.
Today we will be meeting a dynamic nurse thought leader and CEO of the Gritty Nurse podcast. We will be discussing her rich nursing career and the work she's doing in Jamaica to help the relief efforts in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. Amie Archibald-Varley is an award-winning healthcare and political thought leader and a #1 nationally best-selling author of The Wisdom of Nurses. As a sought-after speaker represented by the National Speakers Bureau, she advocates for mental health, health equity, courageous conversations, engaging communities and workplaces through the power of storytelling and compassion. She actively encourages open and honest communication within communities and workplaces, facilitating spaces for meaningful dialogue and the exploration of challenging topics through the powerful lens of storytelling.
Yes, she's a dynamic nurse. She's going to be talking about the Gritty Nurse podcast. She's also going to be talking about her book, The Wisdom of Nurses. And we're going to also find out how we can work collaboratively with the Gritty Nurse podcast, and specifically with this dynamic nurse, and providing services and aid, needed aid to the hurricane victims in Jamaica. So first, I just want to thank you for taking the time to actually meet with me. The second thing I want to ask you is, could you just give me a brief background on what led you to nursing? And then after that, how did you get into the Gritty podcast, developing the Gritty podcast?
Yeah, so thank you for first and foremost having me on. I'm always excited to speak to other nurses, but what led me into nursing? It was kind of crazy. So it was my first real experience with healthcare. My grandfather had lived with me at the time, and he fell sick. So he had a stroke, and we had to take him to the emergency department. And this was kind of my first real interaction with healthcare. And I remember, us getting there and my mom kind of pleading with the team saying, this is what happened. And then being like, go wait in the hall, go wait there, we'll call you. And feeling like something was kind of off. And I remember thinking to myself that, is this the way that they treat people when they come into the healthcare system? That they, are very unkind. And again, it really put, for me at that point in time, nurses in not the greatest light. And I was probably around like 12 or 13 years old. And I remember saying to myself, I said, you know what? I can do a better job. And that's actually was like my first kind of, I want to be in healthcare. And although my grandfather actually ended up in palliative care, what I did actually see was not all nurses were like some of the nurses that I had met. There were very caring and compassionate nurses who really took the time to understand what was happening with my grandfather and really show him and treat him with kindness during his last days. But so that was another form of inspiration. So 13-year-old me was bright-eyed, and I was like, well, I'm going to eventually get into this profession. And I did. So I went, I'd say probably a non-traditional route. I went and did my bachelor's degree in nursing, but I actually had a little bit of a pause. I got into a car accident in 2007, which took me out of the game. So you would think that nursing school, they'd be super accommodating because I had issues with like my back. And they weren't. They were just like, well, you can't be a nurse if you can't lift and you can't bend and you can't twist. I was like, oh, this is awful. So I actually went and studied sociocultural and anthropological anthropology at the University of Toronto for 3 years. And then through various conversations with some of my mentors who were still nurses at the time, they're like, you need to come back. Nursing needs you. And I kind of came back with this refreshed idea, learning about humans, because that's kind of the study of anthropology. So you learn about, cultures, behaviors, where they came from. And I feel like that really honed and helped my nursing skills. So when I did graduate, I came kind of with an extra piece of education. And I went straight into labor and delivery because that was my love and my joy and my passion. And from labor and delivery, I continued to do more education. I went back and I did my master's degree. So I did a dual degree. I did a master's degree in nursing and I did a master's degree in women's health from the School of Public Health. And yeah, the rest of it's kind of history. I taught in education circles. I was a clinical nurse specialist. And yeah, I just have been able to do a lot of different things in nursing, but it hasn't been perfect, but it has definitely been a journey. That's what I'd say.
Oh, thank you for sharing. I like to think that most nurses, even if they go what is sometimes considered a traditional route, I've yet to see what that really looks like because
Right.
is a traditional route to be like a nursing assistant, then become an LPN, then be an RN. There's so many different ways you can actually get into the profession that honestly, I feel like there's really no real traditional way. But I think that people like to think that there's a traditional way to get into the nursing. I think what you have studied along with your study in nursing, especially on a graduate level, it does really speak to the dynamic nature of nursing and what you actually specifically could bring even more like of that dynamic piece to nursing. So I think that that is awesome. I'm actually very inspired by it as well because I feel that nursing is the type of profession that offers that opportunity for people to bring even more. So like
I
the
agree.
fact that you're
Yeah.
studying women's health is like that allows you to bring even more to those patient encounters and into those health systems and organizations where you're serving. So this is definitely awesome. But I want to hear about the Gritty Nurse podcast. So what made you start the Gritty Nurse podcast?
Oh boy. Well, probably a well-known phrase in nursing, and I'm sure we've all heard it. This phrase that nurses eat their young. And it is such an unfortunate phrase that we have in a profession like ours, where people see it as kind of this part and parcel in the job, or where it's just kind of this accepted initiation, like in a fraternity, and it really should not be. It is actually a shame that we have that phrase, that people that aren't even in healthcare know that phrase. And I had an experience with bullying that was horrifying, to the point where I actually wanted to take my own life. And it should never get to a situation where your mental health is so bad that a profession that you work for makes you feel less than. But I know I wasn't the only person. So I had this awful director, and she gaslit me. She was, I would say that she probably was racist, because I've now heard other stories from other nurses. Um, and she just made me feel like nursing wasn't where I should have been. And I think that's such a awful position to put anyone in, right? I think a lot of us who get into nursing, it's because we're compassionate. We have that lens where we want to take care of other people. And this one nurse, again, she was like a nurse herself, was just, I would say, the pinnacle of evil. Like, she was just such an awful human being. And I quit that job with no prospects. Of course, the organization itself had no structures in place to deal with mental health. You would think that in a healthcare setting that they'd be like, oh, if you have mental health challenges, here's what we'll help you with. They gave me a form that was like, oh, how much can you bend? How much can you lift? How much can you twist? And I was like, well, my body is physically fine, but my mind isn't. And again, they definitely did not deal with the racism, and this is not new in healthcare whatsoever. So I had to quit. Like, I had to take care of myself. And again, in nursing, we aren't taught to take care of ourselves, but I knew that if I didn't, that I would have been in jeopardy. So I also knew that there, like I said, I couldn't have been the only nurse who experienced this, and I actually wasn't, because my former co-host also was experiencing bullying within our work. We worked in the same office, but I guess for whatever reason, we didn't talk about the bullying that we both received from our director. And my cousin had a podcast, and I just said to her, I said, I don't know what this whole podcasting thing is, but why don't we just get a microphone and just talk about our experiences, the realness, the rawness of nursing, because it was not a conversation anybody was really having at the time. I think there were some nursing podcasts, but it was like, educational, or, we're teaching you how to do skills. And I was like, this podcast has to be about the realities. It has to be what nurses face on a day-to-day basis. It has to be those thoughts and feelings that we have that nobody else is actually verbalizing. And I just didn't care. I was at my lowest point. So I was like, you know what? What's going to come out is going to be raw and visceral, because that's where I'm at. And I never would have thought that it would have resonated the way that it did with nurses, not just in Canada, but really across the globe. I've had US nurses, nurses from the UK, Europe, Australia, nurses like in Asia reach out and tell us how impactful the podcast has been. So it was really born out of, I guess, pain and the fact that Black nurses, racialized nurses didn't have a voice. Like, we're in the profession, but again, if you look at the makeup, we weren't seen in those leadership roles nearly to other individuals. So the Gritty Nurse podcast became a space where we were taking up space. We weren't asking for permission. I think we've done that enough, and it was just time to have something different within nursing.
I definitely agree. I think it's I think oftentimes it is downplayed the impact that, like, dealing with that type of the microaggressions, the racism, the hostility in the workplace as a nurse. So again, being Black, it adds a whole different layer to it, because
Yep.
what winds up happening is, as a nurse, as you highlighted, it's a profession that you actually think that they would have the support, mental health supports in place, that the resources would just be flowing, because they're like, well, obviously, if you're giving and giving and giving so much to patients, we still make up the largest segment of healthcare professionals. It would just seem natural that it's like, well, here's some resources for nurses. I can tell you, I remember distinctly between 2013 and 2014, I remember being on a pathway of, like, just researching. And I only distinctly remember because I was working at a job where it was just a small group of nurses working at a predominantly social work dominated, work structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember telling my manager, I said, I have never seen any articles anywhere talking about nursing advocacy as far as advocating for the interest of a nurse. If you look up at the time, at least when I looked up the term nursing advocacy, it was something I was trying to promote in my place of work at the time. I said, we really need to have a space for advocacy, because we were working with social workers, working with a difficult population, trying to close gaps in care, trying to coordinate care, completely drained out emotionally. And it was really no space to give back to us. It was almost like we were
Right.
dealing ourselves like we were superheroes, or like we were above humanity. So it's like, there were times where we would have patients having, some really serious, things, complications, things that required a lot of time and a lot of phone calls and a lot of coordination. And at those times where you really felt bottomed out, there was absolutely no support, nothing in advocacy for nurses. Again, like I said, all the articles that I read, they all discussed advocacy as nurses advocating for the patient, not
Right.
advocating for nurses. So I totally feel you. And that was actually how I learned about the Gritty Nurse podcast, because I was actually looking for a space where nurses were just being honest about how, what their experience was looking like. And nowadays, with TikTok and Instagram and everything, I feel like there's so much more people are saying, and yes, they do it at great risk, but I feel that nurses feel a little bit more. And I'm not going to say we're totally out, like, in the
Right.
clear,
Right.
I feel like nurses feel a little bit more comfortable being honest about their true feelings and their true experiences in nursing, especially Black nurses who I feel like deal with the layer of, is this in my head? And I think that that's the part of it that really is that mental exercise where you're telling yourself, like, nah, am I overthinking this? Or did she really mean to say that? But then when you look at the landscape or you look at how things play out, you're like, wow, well, I guess they didn't select me. It didn't matter how hard I worked or how many days I didn't miss of work. It didn't matter how many things I volunteered to do. I still, obviously wasn't good enough for the management role or for this special program or this special project that could be really transformative for my career. I just wasn't selected for it. And then you see who was selected and you realize that sometimes, while you may think that we've made a lot of progress in that area, we still have so much more to go and to break those barriers down and some of the gatekeeping too that really prevents us from excelling. So I wanted to find out from you, what is the work that you've been doing in Jamaica, especially in light of the devastation following Hurricane Melissa?
Yeah, I felt it was so important for me to give back. Again, like we had mentioned, my mom is from St. Mary's, my dad's from Clarendon. I have family that are in St. Elizabeth. I have family that are in Kingston, and Saint Elizabeth was hit really hard by Hurricane Melissa. And it was actually very fortunate that my cousin's house down there, she actually only received flooding, but like her neighbors' houses, they lost roofs. There are people that are homeless. I don't think people truly know the level of devastation out there. And I had made such good friends with the nurses from the International Council of Nurses when I went out to Montreal, and I was able to actually meet the Jamaican Nurses Association and then invited to speak at their 53rd annual conference. That I just felt that, they've given so much to me to have me come out there to speak with them, to be with their leaders, to learn from them as well. That I felt that how could I not use my platform and my voice to show some form of support and solidarity? So instantly when I saw that, this was happening and there was devastation, I'm a nurse. I mean, that I think a part of our role too is that we help other nurses, right? Like whether they're from the same country that we're in, a war torn country, whatever the case may be, that we all are doing the same work, and it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter whether there's a border. Like we should be able to support nurses wherever they are. So I felt it was important for me to try to at least find out how we can get out there to support. Now, I could tell you it was no easy task because they had no internet services for quite some time. I think it took a little while for them to have Starlink, but I used whatever networks I had. I had some, like I told you, I was out speaking to the NAJ, so I reached out to some of the coordinators. I was able to speak to the chief nursing officer as well, so like the CNO out there, as well as some of the other leaders within the Ministry of Health to try to mobilize nurses to get out there. I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try my best to, one, collect information so people have the right information, knowing if they want to go out there to volunteer their time and support, that I can do that. And then also to make sure that, I'm finding resources that would support the workforce out there in Jamaica, because again, I think they're in a disaster crisis. This isn't regular nursing where you can just, pick up and go, that there's actually much more required. So I had done a lot of research, fact finding, spoke to many, many different people and organizations to really pull, I would say probably, oh my gosh, I think I was hitting almost 200 nurses between Canada, the US, UK, Australia, just to rally them to get out and help them get out to Jamaica So I was able to compile a list, point people in the right direction. And then lastly, I've been actually doing some partnership work with CMAT. So it's the Canadian Medical Assistance Team that's actually right now down in the ground in Jamaica. I was doing some work with the executive director in terms of just connecting her with networks. I got her a place to stay and someone to help drive her around the island. I'm really just doing this navigation because I feel that the nurses out there need so much support. I was speaking to some nurses at the Black River Hospital. They were showing me some of the images of what was happening. Their whole women's ward was destroyed. Their men's ward was destroyed. They were showing me where the X-ray and ultrasound diagnostic image, like there was nothing left. And some of these nurses were working 48 hours, 20, like I couldn't even imagine doing like a 24-hour shift, much as 48 hours, because some of them just couldn't leave. Like they just couldn't physically leave because of the storm or because of, some of the damage to the island. So I just felt it was important for me to do my due diligence. I'm hoping to be able to get out there at some point in time. I do have an 18-month-old, so it was a little bit hard for me to travel, but I want to make sure that I can mobilize whatever support I can. And I think that's being able to support that many nurses to, helping them figure out the right channels, whether it's through licensing, through knowing what to expect when you're on the ground, and then showing what official teams they should go out with, because that was the other piece. There was a lot of nurses that just want to, I think we all have such great hearts, right? We want to be out there. We want to do the great work and support, but this isn't typical nursing. And there's so much more involved. And I had to caution people. And again, I was getting caution even from the Ministry of Health to be like, don't have a nurse just show up out here, because that'll create more confusion. I couldn't imagine a nurse getting sick. And then now they're contributing to some of the pressures that they're seeing in the ED system. So really, I helped orchestrate and organize, and I'm still kind of doing stuff here at the back end, making sure that, there are places that people can donate to, trying to find various different companies and organizations. I can't say the name, but I know they have donated. Actually, I guess I could. I know Figs has donated. I had a conversation with them, actually kind of offline about something else, but I know that they had donated scrubs, because I know scrubs were one of the things nurses was looking at needing out there. So just using all of my different resources and connections through, some of the advocacy work that I had done to really mobilize support for nurses out in Jamaica. And I'm still doing it to this day.
Wow, that is such a blessing. And like you said, nurses, we often think first with our heart, but I can see where you're thinking not only with your heart, but also with your head. And I really appreciate the work that you have been doing. And for this Thanksgiving, actually, I'm going to be having, I created a little Thanksgiving flyer to invite family and friends out to my house for Thanksgiving. And I put a little barrel, image of a barrel on the Thanksgiving invitation, along with a little message to say, bring what you can. I'm going to be sending down a barrel for, I actually want to send it to, I would prefer to send it to Black River Hospital. So I would like to kind of get some things out there, because I wanted to send specifically scrubs. So there's going to be a barrel that's going to have food and those kind of, health and beauty items, and, some those things that, things that women need, right?
Right. No, I feel like, yeah.
And then also send out a barrel with unisex, so it'll be for men and women, but of different sizes as well, scrub sets and socks and underwears and t-shirts and things like that. Again, everything new, packaged things. For me, my goal is really to ensure that the nurses and other healthcare professionals working in those more devastated areas feel the love.
Yes.
Feel that they are supported. Like you said, I could not possibly imagine what they're actually going through, because again, with nurses, we lead with our heart. So we don't think about bathroom breaks. We don't think about lunch breaks. A lot of people, there's always this stereotype, especially nurses in the hospital, that maybe nurses are sitting around doing nothing. If a nurse is sitting around doing nothing, trust me, that nurse in most cases planned that, in the sense where
Right.
they worked out, like, they came in moving probably like a bat out of hell, so to speak, hours of just getting things together just so they can have that time to just sit down and respond to emergencies. At the end of the day, we still clear our schedules in most cases so we can
Yeah,
just be available to respond to emergency. So it's not.
I agree.
Yeah, so I could only imagine what those nurses are actually going through. I also think about, because I work in the health information management space, and I also think about what um, the Jamaica Health Information Management Association is actually dealing with this type of disruption, and how that may actually impact information sharing. So that kind of care coordination, you have patients who may not necessarily be able to advocate for themselves, and it's only through their medical records that we're able to really get a clear picture of their medical history, and what are some concerns that a physician would have to, think about for those patients? And, when you think about it, you already know that that's the kind of things that's going to suffer in this type of devastation. You already know that health information management, although there has been recent efforts in Jamaica to have these better integrated systems so that there's better communication and sharing of information throughout the island, but it is still developing, right?
Yeah.
And so this is definitely a huge interruption, I think. But I do believe in the resilient spirit of Jamaicans. I believe in the resilient spirit of nurses, and then not just nurses, all healthcare professionals, all of the emergency response professionals, and the systems that they have in place in Jamaica. I strongly believe and have faith that even though we have already suffered a lot of loss, and have observed a lot of loss and suffering on the island, I do believe that Jamaicans have a very resilient spirit, and I do believe that better days are ahead. Now, I can't say they're going to be here next month or 2 months or 3 months. And I think the effort to give needs to continue. I definitely
Yes.
don't think that we should feel that, like we're in the clear, like, oh, a couple of months and, we'll get people on their feet. I've seen homes underwater, like you
Yep.
said, hospitals completely down. Generators are scarce on the island. In many cases, people can't afford to have a generator for where we're going to put the
Yeah.
generator when you don't have a roof, when the walls have been knocked down. So my prayers continue to go out to my family in Jamaica, and also just Jamaica across, from everyone in leadership there, the prime minister, right down to the common everyday man and woman, and the children, of course the children. And so, again, I will be sending down those packages, and that's something that I'm going to be doing with my family as a way of showing that gratitude, and that that thankful spirit that it comes around with Thanksgiving. I want that to be a part
Yeah.
of our giving process for this year. So that's something that I'm doing. You're doing excellent work. I do also want to partner with you to continue, like I said, because this is not going to be something that's going to resolve in a few months.
No,
So
not at all. Yeah.
I will definitely be partnering with you to continue to connect with those nurses in Jamaica who suffered, especially in the Black River area, so that we can be able to continue to give resources to them, and help them as they're helping patients. And so my heart was led to actually consider the needs of nurses. Again, like, I'm not discrediting any other healthcare professional. I actually, as I'm just remembering now, I actually did connect with a physician, and he had a wish list, which made things really easy. And I donated there too.
Yeah.
And I've already sent those things down, and he showed me the things that that was purchased that went down. So I'm really happy about that, and I'm just trying to just make sure I'm doing this a few times throughout the year, and just helping as much as I possibly can. But before we go, because we are coming to the end of this conversation, I did want to hear a little bit more about the book.
Okay. And
Yes.
I just want to add one little last
Sure,
point
sure.
that I think everybody can do a little bit. Like, I think some people feel that they need to go out there, but they might not be able to. But like what you're doing, just getting a barrel together, just even letting people know that if you send the barrel before November 30th, it's tariff free, right? Just like little things like that. And the other piece, just to letting people know that even just recently, like our family, we were sending things like nails and hammers because they can't find those materials. Like they're having such difficulty with just finding those basic materials that you would need to rebuild, that even small things like that we wouldn't even think, oh, like we just go to the hardware store and get nails. They're having trouble finding things like that in Jamaica. So even just small things like that too are things that can really help someone rebuild their home. So just even thinking about whatever little things that you can do can help support. But I just wanted to add that last little bit in. And again, not for anybody to ever feel that whatever support that they lend is not enough. I think if we're helping and you have your heart there to say, this is what I want to do, this is what I can do at this time, that's exceptional as well.
Thank you.
But about the book, oh my goodness,
Yes.
where do I start? So I have to say, this is the wildest journey. I would have never dreamed that I would have had the opportunity to write a book and in the way that I was able to do it. So really, it kind of came out of nowhere. Well, at least that's what it felt like to me. And a lot of people say to me, of course it didn't come out of nowhere. You were doing the podcast. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So through doing the podcast and the advocacy work that I had been doing across Canada and the US and various different other places, an agent reached out to us. So he was one of the largest literary agents in Canada. His name is Rick Broadhead. And I saw this email come in, and I remember my former co-host being like, I think it's fake. And I was like, I don't know, let's check this guy out. And of course it wasn't. And we wrote a couple different drafts to kind of get an idea. He was helping us support with, what would be something that people really need to know about. And I remember saying to him, I said, could you name a famous nurse? And he looked at me and was like, yeah, Florence Nightingale. I was like, other than Florence Nightingale. And
Like Mary Seacole?
it was dead silence. I was like, okay, so that's a problem. There's Mary Seacole. There's, Mary Eliza Mahoney. There's like all these other nurses that people just didn't know about. I'm like, this is wild. And the other piece was, I think people have an idea of what nurses do, but they don't truly understand what we do. So, and media does a really bad job of depicting it. Like, okay, besides The Pit and some other really good shows, they do a really poor job of depicting what nurses do. Either we're stupid, or we're these saints, or we're demonic,
or
we're
Nurse Jackie,
or all these really we're really not like that. So I wanted to take the opportunity for us to write the book, The Wisdom of Nurses, to show the greater public that there's so much that we do that they don't understand, and also to kind of combat the narrative that Florence Nightingale is the only nurse that did a lot of work. It's like, Mary Seacole was just as pivotal in the Crimean War. And I know that history is written by the victors, but that doesn't tell the full story, just as, various other histories that we know about. So again, it was just really important for me to shed that light that people could understand a little bit more about nursing, and then also pause to ask questions about why we don't know these histories. Where do the idea and the image behind nursing come from? And also just to put nursing at the forefront. So we had so many nurses who came and shared their stories with us, and we put those realities in as well. And it was just, I would say it was a labor of love. It was just such a passion project. And I was very fortunate that, we had a large publisher reach out to us. I think there's like 3 or 4 large publishers. So it's like HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster. And we were able to get signed with HarperCollins. And yeah, we wrote this book, and it became a #1 national bestseller. We were on the bestsellers list for, I think it was 6 weeks. And it was just beyond my wildest dreams. I went on my book tour 2 days post C-section of having my baby. I do not recommend doing that. But it was just such a wonderful thing to accomplish for nurses. And I think that, I really hope that we see more nurse authors because we have so much to say.
Yes, I actually had work that was published for me, but I was in graduate school by the school library. Actually, they reached out to the university library, and they said, "Oh, we would love to publish your essay." And then later on, I had wrote more of a manual of how to address like racism and discrimination within healthcare from a more systems design standpoint. But essentially, the paper was kind of birthed out of that as well, because I was actually calling out the system. So, if you're calling out a system for discrimination and for being kind of part and parcel to some of the negative outcomes that we see, particularly in the Black community, especially with the issues like the Tuskegee experiment, forced sterilization, history of just mistrust, and understandable, mistrust of the healthcare system, well documented
Absolutely.
concerns that Black folks should have when they're engaging the healthcare system. And because I was calling out the healthcare system as being a part of the problem, I my solution, okay, was actually looking at how we can fix the system.
Right.
How do you fix that system from within? I too have found that through writing, I've been able to kind of get my thoughts and my ideas out about the concerns that I have in nursing. And I think what you have done with your podcast and also with this book, it speaks to again the dynamic nature of nursing, and how nurses, given the opportunity, many of us will show again that real value added when you have a person with the nursing wisdom. I think it's so important because again, oftentimes with the historical context of nursing, there's this idea that nursing is always getting their direction from medicine.
Right.
And the wisdom of nurses, I think what it really speaks to is also this idea that nurses do develop their own intelligence, right? A wisdom that comes out of nursing through these experiences, that we see actually woven throughout our healthcare systems. But like I said, like you mentioned about the INC, ICN rather.
Yeah, yeah.
It speaks to that kind of the global impact that we have. So I want to thank you for your time. What I will include here, I want to find out what is the best way for nurses who want to give and help out in this effort to give, whether they want to donate to directly to Jamaica, if they want to directly connect with a nursing association in Jamaica, or if they would like to maybe adopt a family or adopt a hospital. Do you have any a way that you would like to offer here for us to communicate with teams there, or if we can directly communicate with you, what is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, because I do have some connections with the National Nurses Association of Jamaica, I could definitely, give you the email. Her name was Andrea, of one of the nurses that I was working with. And then also just even reaching out to the CNO as well. I think that those two people were the ones that I kind of leaned on for what the supports that were needed. And this is the other thing. I think we have to make sure we ask them what they need, right? Not to make any assumptions. So it's always
Right.
best to kind of reach out and say, hey, what is it that you need at this point in time? I'm
Mhm.
happy to field questions, and I'm happy to even give out her email so people can find a way to connect directly with her. I think it might be a little bit much if everyone starts emailing her personally, but maybe what I'll do is actually give the National Nurses Association a general email as well. For
Mhm.
people who want to give, specifically, I would say definitely reach out to them too. But of course, there are those national lines. So like there's the ncj.org.jm. and that's the Nursing Council of Jamaica. There's also the ministry. So what is this one again? I'm gonna forget. moh.gov.gm. And then like the Nurses Association of Jamaica, it's NAJTREVENNION.org, but I can send that information to you as well. But yeah, like I think the best ways to give through official channels. But again, if you do know someone that's boots on the ground, and there are a couple nurses who've reached out to me, some nurses in Westmoreland, some nurses in Black River, I'm happy to pass that information along, because what I've just been doing was giving, like I asked them for permission first to say, can I give your information to this association that's doing this work, and then help getting little packages out there. I know there's other organizations like Samaritan's Purse and things that are doing some work as well. But yeah, like I think, like I said, like every little bit helps, right? If we can give in some way, I think that just shows that, we continually want the island to rebuild. I think about the last time I was out there was just last year, and Jamaica is such a beautiful place, and Jamaican people are such beautiful people. Like I think about every time when I go to the island, just how much at home I feel. Like I know Canada is my home, but it's just such a different sense. As soon as you land at the airport, the smells of the sea, just the whole vibe is different. And like you said, Jamaican people are such resilient people. But we still need to show that support, because I do believe that, all these agencies eventually will leave, right? They're all out there doing this kind of initial ground support, and it will be left up to our communities, our various diaspora, to continue to help support. So whatever way we can now and then continuously, I think will be really important. And again, just keeping those channels open. And like I said, I'll happily give you those additional emails for support. And then, yeah, feel free to reach out to me, and I will do the best I can to put people into contact with the right areas. So I do know, like I said, Black River Hospital, Westmoreland is struggling a lot too. The hospital up there, and I believe that there's a hospital. So CMAT, I have to remember, they're stationed right now in Mo Bay, but I can't remember the specific hospital they're at. But I just know that just around the island, there are some places that are so hard hit, and if we can help in any way, we really should. It's all of our homes, right? If we
Yes,
have Jamaican parents or whatever the case may be, it still is our home. And if we want to continue to go back there, we need to show our support that way as well.
You got it. Well, again, this was a great conversation with you, Amie. I hope that the work that you are doing now, that it inspires and continues to inspire. I think it's remarkable, your story of how you evolved in nursing and how you didn't let the that negative experience um, turn you off of the profession, but instead you allowed it to empower you and transform how you show up as a nurse and show up as a nurse leader and also a thought leader. Because again, you don't get to work in the communication space and out there in the public without being a thought leader to a certain degree. But what you have been able to carve out for yourself is just dynamic. And I hope nurses are truly inspired by your work.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so, pardon?
I said, oh my goodness.
Yes, it's impressive. I mean, like I said, I've been watching your work for years, but when I noticed that you had extended yourself around this emergency effort, I said, "Wow!" I'm like, I need to know how I can, contribute to your efforts, and yet at the same time get a better feel of what it's like, boots on the ground, connecting with those nurses who are boots on the ground. So again, I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. And I think this is where I say to folks who have any form of a platform, I think never forget or lose sight about like what you're actually doing and why you're doing it. I think that, there are some people who have the opportunity and have such a great opportunity to make change because they have large platforms and they do absolutely nothing with it. And it just begs the question, it's like, as a nurse, what are we really doing if we aren't trying to change healthcare outcomes, if we aren't trying to, amplify other people's stories that are other than just our own? And I think that if I had the opportunity to be able to help someone in some way, whether that's just using my platform or mobilizing the connections I have, then why not, right? It just never made sense to me to not do that, and I think maybe that's just how I was raised or whatever the case may be. But as long as I have the ability to speak and shake up the ground a little bit, I'm gonna continue to do it. And I think that I want to bring other people along on that journey with me. Again, it can be challenging to be in the advocacy space, but it's also so rewarding to know that you are there to help and support someone, and then also even to learn something, because sometimes you'd be surprised what you learn when you're trying to advocate and to be like, oh, okay, maybe I need to do this in a different way, or I have to have a conversation in a different way. And there's a lot of give and take, but if there's an instance of where you can use your power, then you should do it for good.
We want to hear from you. Schedule a free consultation or send us an email at advancednurses@acd4n.com or visit our websites www.advancednurses.info or www.acd4n.com.